Welcome back to the Armchair Coaching Podcast. My name is Coach Sheffer. I am your host today. Today we are going to be talking some Alabama Crimson Tide football. It's about darn time that we talked about them. But first, I'm going to let these coaches introduce themselves. So, Coach Bandstra, please introduce yourself.
My name's Nick Bandstra. I am the wide receivers coach and special teams coordinator at Fairborn High School, just out of Dayton, Ohio. We are 2-0 at the moment. We are on a bye week for the next 2 weeks, which we'll probably explain a little bit later why that is. I also run a YouTube channel, Coach Bandstra. Nicholas Bandstra on YouTube has a bunch of coaching clinics. I've also been uploading a lot of old double wing film lately for those of you interested in it. The one I got coming out this weekend has a little over 600 rushing yards in a game. Gets them out Gilead a couple years ago. Then you can also find me on Twitter at Coach Bandstra.
All right. Thank you, Coach Bandstra. And Coach Steve, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Coach Steve. I'm the offensive line coach and run game coordinator at Addison Trail High School. It's a western suburb of Chicago. On Twitter, you can find me at Coach_Steve72. I do have my own podcast, the Sideline podcast with Coach Steve. Starting to interview some more coaches, getting that going, because Coach Sheffer's catching me on the podcast in less time. So I stepped my game up. But it's about time we talk Alabama football. And Coach Bennett, where are you at?
Yeah, Coach Bennett's not here. He was giving us some crap earlier on our Twitter chat that we had going on for not seeing messages and stuff of that nature. So calling us names, telling us, no excuses for not seeing the message. And guess what? He's late for the podcast. So hopefully he'll be able to make it tonight. If he does, we'll pause and let him introduce himself, and then we'll give him some crap. Coach Steve, real quick, you mentioned there may be some updates in high school football in your area.
So not to talk super bad, Illinois has been all over the place. But as of late, we saw Michigan reverse their decision to have fall football. Was it Delaware today that came out and said that they were going to have fall football, so they reversed it. And around Illinois, you've got Indiana that's playing, Iowa's playing. So our governing body sent a letter to our governor and the Department of Health stating how they could take over the decision-making of how to return safely. They have a plan in place for us to return safely. So they're trying to get it to where maybe we can play. I know what they're shooting for, maybe starting 3 weeks, if they can get it done ahead of time. So we're going to wait and see. I don't have my hopes up too high because of how Illinois has operated over the years. But we're shooting to try to play in the fall. Right now we're still in the spring. But our positivity rate's gone down, and it's been down for a while. So they're trying to do the best they can to be safe. They've talked to other states to see how they've done it. So if it can happen, school districts have a plan in place so we can try to go. So fingers crossed that I'm wrong and we can start playing maybe in October.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. I know that here in Virginia, it depends on the county, but in some counties close by, I've seen some Twitter videos, I've seen like Instagram posts of these schools have been able to go in and work in the weight room for a few months now. And we finally just got the green light about a week ago that we can go do like on the field work, but we can't use any equipment. We can't use balls. We can't go lift weights in the weight room. We have to stay in pods for working out on the field. It's a lot. And then our head coach said that our AD basically told him that it was a minor miracle that our county even allowed us to do that, which is saying something about our county. So I'm not really having a whole lot of optimistic thoughts about football in the fall for Virginia. It's probably not going to happen. But someone who is playing football or was playing football for a while here in the fall, Coach Bandstra, do you want to go ahead and tell your story about what's happening?
Well, we're 2-0, so that's positive. Our goal is now 4-0 before playoffs because we won't play the next 2 weeks. I have to word this a different way because I like being employed. So the way I'll word this is We played West Carrollton last week. They had a player show up Saturday with symptoms who ended up got tested. As a result, we have to quarantine several members of our team for a variety of reasons, safety and for quarantine reasons. We will not play the next varsity football next week. We may play JV or freshman next weekend. We are still able to practice with those who are not quarantined. So we're going to just start prepping. I have a lot more thoughts about that situation than I'm going to say on here. Just be mindful of my district. But it's unfortunate. It makes me want to reiterate what I say constantly on here and on other platforms is make sure you're doing what you're supposed to do. Make sure you're following protocol. Make sure you have not only your program, but every child's interest and best heart. Make sure you're being safe and smart and do what you need to do.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of a story, and I'm going to tell the story. It's about my wife. I won't say where she works, and most of the people listening probably won't know where this is, so that's okay. But she works in a county that's not too far away from where we live at a elementary school. She's a school nurse, and they recently had, they're completely virtual except for they have certain kids who require, like certain special ed kids who require to be in the building with a teacher for accessibility reasons. Unfortunately, one of the speech pathologists at that said elementary school tested positive, and she was in close contact with all of those kids. And then two of those kids tested positive. After she tested positive, my wife had to coordinate with the health department, the local health department, to do contact tracing for every student, every person that may have been in close contact with this person. All of those people had to be quarantined. Many of them had to be tested. And this was an ongoing process for, I'm going to say it, because it took over the whole weekend. We never got to spend much time together because she was constantly on her phone, very stressed out, barely slept. And then the whole process took about 5 days to get resolved. And even though it's technically resolved, she's still dealing with the consequences. And I know there's a lot of people out there who think we need to be back in school 100%. The kids need to be together. I get it. But there's also the argument that this was a school district that is 100% virtual except for a very small amount of kids. And just think about the headache that my wife, who's a school nurse, had to go through to fix this. Imagine if all of the kids in your school were actually in school that day. Imagine, and excuse my language, imagine the shit show that would happen. The contact tracing is unbelievable. A lot of people don't see it they don't see behind the scenes. I do, unfortunately. And I see the behind the scenes of contact tracing. It is not fun. So to me, I'm not saying 100% virtual school is the way to go. I'm not trying to be political or anything. I'm just saying there are reasons beyond, a lot of people in our county, the parents included, thought that the teachers were being unreasonable when we were asking for virtual school. It's not, and they think the only reason that the school board went virtual was because of the teachers, and they said, the teachers were crying and that's why they went virtual. That's definitely not the reason. So everybody needs to take big picture, and like you said, Coach Bandstra, please guys, do the right thing. All right.
I do want to reiterate before we go that as of right now, none of those players that came in contact with their player have none of our players has tested positive since that instance. But out of precaution, we do have to quarantine. And so people also kind of need to be aware of that is take the precautions you need to take. be safe, be smart. Like I said, if you're not sure, I mean, sometimes you have to do stuff you don't want to do.
Yep. All right. Let's stop talking about pandemic and COVID and let's start talking about Alabama football. That's what we came here for tonight. So like we do with the other program profiles, we're going to start off with some statistics. Alabama stats. We've got head coach Nick Saban. This is his 13th season at Alabama. He is currently at a win-loss record of 152 wins and 23 losses with a winning percentage of .869. Compare that to the Alabama all-time win record of 916 wins, 331 losses, and 43 ties, a percentage of .727. So Nick Saban is definitely above average when it comes to Alabama head coaches. Alabama all-time has claimed 27 SEC championships, not just the division champion. They've claimed whole SEC championship 27 times. During the college football playoff era, they have made 5 appearances in 2014, 15, 16, 17, and 18. They have a playoff record of 6-3. And overall, they have claimed 17 national championships. So 17 claimed national championships, 5 of those under Nick Saban, 2009, 11, 12, 2015, and the 2017 national title. Last year's offensive stats, points per game, 47.2. I almost said 407. Good Lord. 47.2 points per game, yards per game, 510.8, passing yards per game, 342.2, and rushing yards per game, 168.5. So last year they were definitely more of a passing team than they had been in the past. All right, so there's just the 3 of us right now. So let's go ahead and get into our first question. I'm going to give Coach Steve first shot at this one since he's been so eager to talk Alabama for so long. Real quick, personal thing here. I've had Alabama on every single poll for this podcast. Whenever I put a poll out, I'm like, who do you guys want to hear about next? I always put Alabama on there. And I'm going to tell you, they always get the least amount of votes. It's almost like nobody wants to hear about Alabama anymore. So, I mean, I don't know what's going on with that. But also, we haven't mentioned it yet, but from now on, what we're going to plan on doing, since we've hit a couple of the high notes, a couple of the elite programs, what we're going to do, we're going to go conference by conference, and I decided that we were going to start off with Power 5 conferences and move on from there. I put out a Twitter poll, asked whether or not they wanted the coaches wanted SEC, Pac, or Big 12, or ACC, because those are the 3 big Power 5 conferences that are playing right now. And SEC overwhelmingly won. And I figured since we're talking SEC, might as well start with Bama. So, Coach Steve, your first question for tonight. What are your personal thoughts and feelings concerning Coach Nick Saban?
He's a winner. I mean, this one we can probably talk about for a while. That's why I wish if there's a couple more people, this could go on forever. People's opinion is that he's winning at all cost type of person because he's won championships. He calls it the process. If anybody's read a book on him, how he coaches, he calls it the process. So when you're outside looking in, he's a great coach. He knows how to win. He can recruit, but he never stops working. And I know we'll get to on staff later, but they work all the time till midnight, get up at 5 a.m., they're right back at it. How to put it into good words is I think he cares about the kids. He gets them where they need to go. He's about running. He treats that place like an NFL team. People don't want to talk about it. College football is like a minor league. It is minor football, and that's how he approaches it. He worked under Bill Belichick. He understands how to build it up. He's one of the best college football coaches in history from his winning and getting kids to the NFL. Some of the things I want to say we'll get to later, but he's just a winner. He's tough. He's nitty gritty. And he's always about the process. He never stops, never, ever stops. And a couple of things I have about him from the books I read, we'll get to later, but he grinds it out, never stops. That guy does not know how to stop working.
I almost wanted to add like a second part to this question because you got two programs at the top of college football right now. You got Alabama and you got Clemson. And everybody wants to compare Nick Saban to Coach Dabo Swinney. And I almost added that as a question. Like, what are your thoughts about the differences between the two? How are they the same? And, you know, they're both winners, but I think they do it in completely different ways. And Coach Bandstra, what were your thoughts about Coach Nick Saban?
I mean, he's arguably one of the top 3 college football coaches of all time. I mean, I don't think that's the question. I mean, him and Bill Belichick are two of my favorite people to watch and study. I love, like, just from a program development standpoint. I understand people have problems or disagree with how they approach things or their intensity, and I get all that. But one, you can't argue with the results. Two, I mean, last I checked, they win. 3, you don't hear many players complain. I mean, especially about Saban. I mean, you hear a little bit more about Belichick in the NFL, some complaints. I mean, but from a Saban's perspective, you don't hear players. You see a lot of them go back, try to be GAs or do workouts or et cetera back on campus. And he lets them all there. Like, and then how much success his assistants have garnered. Like, I mean, there was a 4 straight year period where he pretty much had to replace almost every assistant on his staff because he develops assistants and helps them improve their situation. If you leave his staff, typically it's for promotion, either a coordinator or and really mostly a head coaching job. Like I said, I think I understand why people might disagree with his intensity. Maybe it's just not how their personalities have worked, but I mean, you can't argue with the success and kind of like Coach Steve's standpoint. Like he truly, understand he truly cares about the kids. I mean, I've watched the ESPN stuff. I mean, he has kids over at his house, boating and doing stuff in the lake, and I mean, he's not. Yes, 365 days a year, even probably on Christmas, he's probably prepping for Auburn or Clemson. But in the end, I mean, he's a good football coach.
Yeah. So let's move on to the next one. Recently, within the past couple of years, Coach Saban's name has been brought up for some potential open jobs in the past, namely the Texas Longhorns. Do you ever see a situation where Saban would leave Alabama for another job? And if so, which job would he consider? And Coach Bandstra, I'm going to let you go for this one.
No, I really don't. I think all that's negotiating for better contract or better money for his program. I mean, if you maybe 5-10 years ago, but with his age at this point, I doubt he really wants to start over. I mean, like I lived in Texas for 7 years. It is one of the most profitable programs, and I understand the attractiveness to it. But he's a competitor, and Texas, outside of playing Oklahoma, that conference is not nearly as competitive as the SEC. It just isn't. He wants to win, and he wants to compete with the best. I mean, I said for the longest time, the only thing I could see him maybe trying the NFL again, but even then, he's at his age, he's not doing that. I just don't – it's hard for me to foresee him leaving. I mean, had he been from a state that had a more major college program, I could see that. But he is not. The only other school that I could see trying outside of Texas that could afford to pay for him and maybe pull him away, and unfortunately Coach Ben's not here for me to say this, but is Ohio State. Like, from a revenue standpoint, who would shell out that kind of money and who would invest the way Coach Saban wants to invest in athletics, That is the only one, but it's not going to happen. One, Ryan Day ain't leaving anytime soon, and B, Nick Saban's never leaving Alabama.
All right, Coach Steve.
I agree. I think you hear about his name getting thrown around because his agent wants to hear that. So then Alabama goes, oh my goodness, we have to up our contract by $1 million or whatever. He's not all about the money, but if you look at the money he brings into that program, he wants a big piece of it. Like, hey, I win championships. Our kids go to the NFL. We graduate. We need the money. He's never going to leave. Now, if he wasn't winning championships like he had, maybe because at the beginning of his career, he bounced around a lot from being he's been all over the place. So a couple years ago, if he wasn't winning championships, yeah, you might have seen him at Texas. But right now, no. He's built it up. It's perfect. It's a well-oiled machine. And, like he said, he's not going to leave now. With his age, he's not going anywhere. If he was –
No. God damn it. Hold on. I think my internet pooped out on me again. right in the middle of what you were saying there, Coach Steve.
Well, short version is no, he's not going anywhere. No amount of money. He's done with the NFL. If he retires and a coach wants him to be up in the box for something, he might, but he's done with the NFL. He's never going back, I don't think. Why give up a good thing? I think he's realized that. Again, a good thing, why ruin it? No matter how much money he's going to make. He makes a lot of money. He makes more money than NFL coaches, so.
Yeah, the only reason I could ever see him leaving Alabama is if there was some kind of really bad scandal. Something like what happened at Ole Miss a couple years ago, calling hookers from the coach's phone and stuff like that. But I don't know. I don't ever see him leaving. If I had to choose a program that he would leave for, someone that could shell out the money or has enough prestige, maybe a USC, maybe a Notre Dame, maybe a Texas. Those are the only ones that I could really see who have the checkbook to compete for that. But I don't think he's leaving for money. I think he's.
Do you think he'd go to Illinois?
If he wants a challenge, yeah.
If he gets bored.
Yeah, if he gets bored.
I mean,
the next question. Yeah, go ahead.
Stick to him, like.
I couldn't see him going to the NFL after the debacle he had at Miami.
No, I mean, but that also is layer factors. I mean, and they talk about the what ifs all the time. Had they signed Drew Brees instead of Culpepper, like the woulda, shoulda, couldas. But I'd also argue, had he been in a different division than Bill Belichick, I mean, again, is that woulda, shoulda, coulda stuff. I mean, Pete Carroll got a second chance and did well.
Yeah. It almost makes me wonder, Nick Saban might be one of the greatest, if not the greatest, head coaches in college football history. And Bill Belichick may be one of the greatest NFL coaches in history. Would Bill Belichick be just as good in college as he is in the NFL, and vice versa? Those are some interesting questions that could be a podcast in itself, maybe. Next question here. Talk a little bit about recruiting. In 2019, this is talking about the NFL, there were a total of 56 former Crimson Tide players on active NFL rosters. Is this indicative of good coaching from the staff, or does it have to do more with recruiting? Because we got to think that they are consistently top 5 recruiting classes. Personally, I'm thinking it's now that he has that program established, it's kind of like you said, it's pre-NFL right now at Alabama. It's almost like a pipeline straight to the NFL. And somebody told me the other day, we were talking about, you remember how they had that developmental league, like the AAF or something of that? Was that what it's called, AAF? Or one of those.
Sounds right.
Didn't really work out. Stopped after like the fourth game. I was like, it would be pretty good if they had a developmental league, and he said they do. It's called the SEC, and you're not wrong. So I don't know, because they are consistently recruiting many of the best players in the country year round. It's kind of tough for me to decide whether or not, is it the recruiting or is it the coaching at this point? Coach Steve, do you have any thoughts?
My answer may not be very popular. I say both, because you can get those recruits. You have to be able to recruit. So he can recruit. He hires a staff that can recruit. But then once you get those players, what do you do with them? And they get the best out of those players. And now that he's established, these players are going to go to him saying, oh, Nick Saban knows NFL coaches. He knows how to get them to the NFL. So that's what it's kind of turned into. Same thing at Clemson. It's starting to happen there with Dabo Sweeney. People know, okay, if I go there, championship, maybe to the NFL. So I think it's both a little bit. You have to get the kids there first. It's kind of like the NBA, Michael Jordan, them, yeah, they're great, but Phil Jackson had to control it. Like, he had to be able to do that. So it takes a special head coach to do that, special head coach to develop the staff in order to control those five-star recruits, get that talent, develop it. And the recruiting thing is, we know how to get players to the NFL. Look, we have 56 right now. So it's a little bit of both, I think. It starts with the players, but then you got to control it. So I'm going to go with both.
Okay. It's interesting. You don't really hear a lot of discipline issues coming out of Alabama. Maybe they do deal with it while they're there, but they deal with it in-house and it just doesn't get out. And then you look at the types of guys that come out of Alabama and go into the NFL. Not a lot of them that I know of have gotten in trouble. Maybe a couple of them have done some things they shouldn't have, but not a whole lot. So maybe there is something going on with the coaching there that's turning them into men of good quality character. Coach Bandstra, what are your thoughts?
I'm with Coach Steve on it's a little bit both, but I will say it's probably a little bit more coaching than recruiting. And the reason I say that is, if you look at just the recruiting rankings the past 4 years, Texas is top 5 3 out of the 4 years. That's no shot at Texas. It's still a good football program, but Alabama is going 11-1 every year, or 12-1. They've lost to Clemson. Okay, they're dominating, and even as a Midwestern, I'll say this: the toughest conference from top to bottom. Oh, top to 10. But it's a little bit both. And you like I said, I go back to how many quality people have left: Kirby Smart, Mario Cristobal, Lane Kiffin. Okay, just to name a few. It's just quality coach after quality coach that are good, not only at recruiting, but X's and O's and player development. And it's usually the same 3 or 4 schools every year who produce quality NFL talent. And I think it's a combination of that: good recruiting, getting a lot of 4 and 5 stars, but at the same time, they develop those 4 and 5 stars. And to your point about discipline, I think since he's been there, I remember there was one off season where he got a lot of crap about how they handled something. I don't even remember what it was. It's part of one of the ESPN documentaries about Nick Saban on the off season. He was getting crap about how they handled something in house, or how they kicked off a player who got in trouble, or gave him a second chance or whatever. But outside of that, nobody has. It's because of the culture he develops. To Coach Steve's point, it's a program. There's a set way of doing things, and he's going to work, and part of that process is developing his culture.
Mm-hmm. You kind of mentioned some of those guys, those high-profile names that have either gone to Alabama or come out of Alabama, coaching-wise. So the next question I have here: the Alabama coaching staff has gone through quite a few high-profile members. Some key names here: Kirby Smart, who's currently the head coach at Georgia. He was the defensive coordinator at Alabama. Jeremy Pruitt, currently the head coach at Tennessee. former defensive coordinator at Alabama. Lane Kiffin, before he went to Alabama, he was the head coach at Tennessee, head coach at USC, got fired there, went to Alabama, became the offensive coordinator, had a lot of really good offenses while he was there. Got another head coaching job at FAU. Now he's at Ole Miss. Steve Sarkisian, another guy who got fired as a head coach, went to Alabama for a while, was the offensive coordinator, then had a little stint in the NFL, and then decided to come back to Alabama. What do you think makes Alabama, and I'm going to put this in air quotes, a coaching destination? Coach Bandstra, I'll let you have this one first.
The structure. I mean, it teaches coaches, especially ones who have been prior head coaches, how to run a program more efficiently, how to hire people more efficiently. Like, I know Lane Kiffin has people who love him and hate him. I personally love Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin is one of my favorite people to watch. And you can see, like, the growth he has. And yes, the way he left Alabama sucked, and that is what it is. But, like, he talks about it. He still praises Nick Saban all the time. But you can tell based off from his time at USC and Tennessee compared to when he was at FAU, how he learned how to hire people and put people in the right positions and take chances on some people and develop them. And he's done the same thing at Mississippi State. I think it's the same thing for Mario Cristobal. In my personal opinion, Mario Cristobal was his biggest loss on staff. Mario Cristobal is one of the best O-line coaches in the country. I thought he was great at FIU before he got to Alabama. But, I mean, like, all of them, like, openly talk about the things they learn. And everybody's a little different. But, I mean, Lane Kiffin's probably the most open about what he has learned and how much he learned while he was there, just from practice structure, meeting structures, when to do certain things, et cetera. And I think that's the key. And, like, it doesn't matter who's there. It doesn't matter what assistants. The structure stays the same. Now, you might tweak scheme here or there, especially offensively. But in the end, it's, okay, this is the protocol we're going to follow. This is the practice structure we're going to follow. This is how we're going to recruit. This is what we're going to focus on. This is what I want you to look for. Okay, here's the standard on how you're going to do things. If you don't abide by it, you're going to find another job.
All right. Coach Steve has put up a new background of, if you're listening to this on the podcast, it is Coach Saban holding up the crystal ball. Honestly, I still think that's my favorite national championship trophy over the new one. Personally, I like the crystal ball better. But I think you're trying to make a point here, Coach Steve. What point are you trying to make?
Oh, just poking fun. I mean, they go there to learn how to run a program. They go there to get better. And since he's won the championships, they say, how does this happen? So they go there. I don't know. It is a coaching destination, but the more stuff that comes out about how he runs things, it's not as much, I guess. It's almost turned into, not for younger coaches, let me say that, these older coaches like, Lane Kiffin, who've been around, he can coach football. He could coach football before he got to Alabama, but he went to Alabama for like a second chance, kind of like, let me reinvent myself. Let's see how Nick Saban does it. And like, Coach just said, they butted heads a lot. And maybe I'm off topic, and I have 3 books of Nick Saban. Saban, The Making of a Coach, how good you want to be, and 4th and Goal Every Day, And the one about Nick Saban, I can't remember if it was the LSU championship or the Alabama one, the first one he won, Alabama or LSU. There was a thing in there about they won, the confetti's coming down. He said, okay, guys, coaches meeting in a half hour or whatever. They're in there, and the other coaches want to open a beer. They just won the championship. Nick Saban pulls out his briefcase, hands them all folded, and says, you're going here, you're going here, you're going here. And they said, what are you talking about? He goes, we have lost so much time recruiting because of this national championship. This is not part of the process. The process is we have to recruit. We have to get ready for next year already. And so they said, and Lane Kiffin said this, Nick Saban doesn't know how to have fun. If you go have a beer with him, he's going to talk about football. He's going to talk about school. He's going to talk about business. He's going to do whatever. And to him, that's fun. He's not going to have a beer, laugh, giggle, get drunk and do all that. So he's always about the process. And you see these coaches leave a little bit because I think they get burned out. They don't know how he can do it like that. And that's just an example. He immediately handed him out saying, we've lost time. And he gets that from Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick has said it. When they won the Super Bowl, he goes, well, we just lost, weeks of looking at players to get better for next year. That's what they think. So you see these guys learn that. They may not like it, but then you're going to see them do it when they leave. So they learn how to run the program and just make it a well-oiled machine. You're seeing at Georgia a little bit right now. Kirby Smart is doing pretty well at making that better. Tennessee is struggling a little bit. Lane Kiffin got FAU back on the map. He's going to get Ole Miss back. So they learned how to do that process, and it works pretty well for them.
All right. I'm not sure if, obviously this is wishful thinking, but if I ever become a college coach, I'm not sure if I would necessarily be cut out to be working in Alabama. Just from hearing the stories, if you listen to the stories of what it's like to coach for Bill Belichick, just being a young, they don't have grad assistants in the NFL, but what do they call those, analysts? I think they call them an analyst. Basically, you watch film, you have to watch the same play over and over and over again for hours, picking up little details. I like watching film like the next guy, but I got 2 kids. I got a wife who I need to keep happy. I don't know if that would be the way I would go. Now, if I were older and I didn't have to worry about my kids all the time, maybe.
You watch Bill Belichick's thing, he spends 22 minutes on one play, because he wants to figure out exactly what each offensive line is doing, wide receiver. That's what Nick Saban does. That's where he learned it, when he was with them at the Browns.
It's the little things, the little details, and it's working.
Time though is that Browns staff.
Mm-hmm.
That sweet Lord, that staff, like Kirk Ferentz. Oh my Lord, that was a staff. Such a waste. Like they could have just had the Browns not moved and all things dominoed. Oh God.
Yeah, we need to do a program profile on the Browns and just poop on them the whole time. Well, they do that to themselves, so. All right. Next question is a little bit about schedule for the 2020 season. So I have the schedule here. I'm going to read it off real quick. We've got first game at Missouri, then at home versus Texas A&M, who is ranked 13th. And then at Ole Miss, at home versus Georgia, who's ranked number 4. At Tennessee, who's ranked 25th. I don't know why they're ranked. At home versus Mississippi State. Away at LSU, who's currently ranked 6th. Probably won't be ranked by the time they play each other. Then at home versus Kentucky. At home versus number 11, Auburn. And away at Arkansas. So my question for you guys, and I think Coach Bandstra is up next. My question for you guys, looking at that schedule, if you had to pick one team, which of those SEC teams has the best shot at upsetting Alabama this year?
Oh God, it's just. I can't pick one. Here's what I'm gonna say. They're either Lane Kiffin or Mike Leach. One of them will beat him. Okay, Lane Kiffin will try to do it just out of spite. Okay, and to prove that the student has overcome the master. And Mike Leach as well, just Mike Leach. He'll just throw the ball physically everywhere. One of the two will win. I would bet it. If LSU hadn't lost so many staff members and players, you could argue that the Auburn game's always the Auburn game. Something crazy could happen. But my money's on either Ole Miss or Mississippi State. It's just something in one of those two games. To me, they'll end the season with one loss. It'll be a game they shouldn't have lost. And then, like typical Nick Saban fashion, they will physically abuse the next 4 to 5 teams after that game. And then the only other person that tries competitively, consistently, would be Kirby Smart at Georgia. I think he does a good job, but I mean, they lost they're a really good O-line coach this offseason, and some other talent. But like I said, my gut is Lane Kiffin or Mike Leach. And just from a media perspective, I'd love for it to be Lane Kiffin.
All right, Coach Steve.
Nobody. No. I always go to Auburn. Somehow, some way, that is ever since Gus got there, Nick Saban's thorn in his foot has been Auburn. But it has to take something crazy. It has to take a kickoff return. It has to take Alabama's injuries and all that stuff. So that one I think could upset them. You like to say Georgia, but they lost a lot on offense. I think defensively they could come up with something because of Kirby Smart. He's a defensive genius. But offensively they lost a lot. They don't have a quarterback right now. I think he opted out, whoever their quarterback was. And then I think Lane Kiffin could, because nobody's beaten him. Nobody that's left Nick Saban to become a head coach has beaten him. So if Lane could dial up something to beat him. And then I don't know if Mississippi State quite will, but I can't wait to see Mike Leach try to call offense against a Nick Saban defense. Nick doesn't call defense, but he has his fingerprints all over it. So I think it'd be Auburn or Ole Miss, but I'm really, really excited to see Mississippi State go against them, especially here in a couple of years when Mike Leach gets it rolling, which he will. So Auburn to upset them, Ole Miss upset them. Just excited to see Mississippi State play them.
Yeah, the one game, if it wasn't so early in the season, I would say it's probably going to be close. Texas A&M is one that you can't really overlook. The last couple seasons, Texas A&M, they just haven't had the horses to hang with Alabama. Early in the season, I think Alabama is usually just too darn good early on. They usually trip up middle of the season. Usually that's when they trip up, kind of like when they start getting bored beating people up. Early in the season, it's going to be difficult. I don't know. I keep seeing that Texas A&M. I keep seeing Jimbo Fisher. He's another one who used to be with Nick Saban. I mean, good Lord. Think of all those SEC West teams who have a Nick Saban influence. It's remarkable. Now, this is going to be my Hail Mary shot, and I hate myself for saying this. Maybe at Tennessee might be an issue. Maybe. I know Bandstra's saying, heck no. Somehow they're ranked. I don't know why they're ranked. I guess because they have nobody else to rank.
I think 10 isn't playing.
They have done better recruiting. I will give Coach Pruitt and his staff credit. I don't think they're there yet. They're trending in the right direction, but it's just going to be hard. I mean, again, kind of like Coach Steve pointed out, his former assistants don't beat him. They don't. That might change this year because the growing number of assistants in the SEC is ever so slightly increasing.
He's got to play 4 of them in a row: Texas A&M, Ole Miss, Georgia, Tennessee.
Yeah,
it's gonna be nuts.
I can't see Tennessee. I mean, who knows? It could happen, but
I'm just throwing it out there,
I
mean, there was a couple years ago when they were competing for maybe a quarter, and then Alabama woke up. But I don't know. I will say, if I had to choose an upset game, I'm not going to say Auburn, because let's say Auburn's 11-1 or 10-2 at that point. Well, usually they're around that area. I don't know if that's necessarily an upset if they were to beat Alabama. The one I'm going to pick, it would have to be Ole Miss, and it's not necessarily because of Lane Kiffin. For whatever reason, Ole Miss has been a bugaboo for Alabama in the past. They've lost to them a couple times, once or twice at home, which they usually don't do. There's just something about Ole Miss, some kind of magic they got going on there, and now they are adding on Lane Kiffin to that. So
they always recruit well. Like it might not look on initial rankings, but like when you look at it, you're like, oh, he was only a 4-star. Like I know that makes it sound like they like bash 4 stars, but like you think some of those kids are like 5-star, and they recruit very well in the state of Mississippi, get some dudes. I mean, they've had some really good defenses over the years. That's part of the reason why Lane Kiffin left FAU for them. I mean, Lane Kiffin could have stayed at FAU, has house paid for by the university still, and just enjoyed life on the route of the ocean right there. But I mean, yeah, I mean, Lane Kiffin wants to be his boogeyman.
Yeah. I mean, could you imagine how much stardom and fame you would get just for beating Nick Saban? I mean, just once.
I just want to see Lane Kiffin's Twitter after he beats Nick Saban. That's all I want. I just want to see that.
I mean, babies he's going to have to kiss. I don't know. All right, let's move on. Next question is, we're going to compare a little bit. There's always the yearly conversation about Bama versus Clemson in the playoffs. Pretty much every single year, except for last year, pretty much every single year, it's whether or not it's going to be Bama and Clemson again. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing for college football? I'm going to give Coach Bandstra first shot.
I mean, it depends on what you want. Like, people say they want, and this is where I'm going to sound like Colin Cowherd for about 5 seconds, and that may or may not be a good thing. Like, people say they want parity, but when you actually like look at, because I teach business and sports as part of my business classes, when you actually look at TV ratings, people don't want parity. They want the same schools to be good over and over again, because they want the school that they hate and they want the school to root for. So just like in college basketball, you have people that hate Duke and hate North Carolina, and people that love them. But I think it just really shows you who's outperforming everybody else. Like, I mean, there's about 3 programs that are consistently in that conversation, and then there's about another 4 to 6 that are in that next tier, and then it's a cliff. Mm-hmm. That's just the way it is. I mean, right now, it's very hard to argue that Nick Saban and Dabo Swinney are not the 2 best coaches with the 2 best programs. It's extremely hard. Personally, would I prefer parity? Yes. But like I said, you look at the data says otherwise. So, I mean, that is what that is.
Yeah, I think having a team like an Alabama for so long, I know people are like, oh, God, Alabama again. But, I mean, you got to have somebody to hate. You know, like, I'm not saying that I hate Alabama. I used to. I will say there was quite a time where I would say, all right, somebody who's going to beat Alabama this year. You know, like, I was like rooting for every team that played Alabama to beat them, and they wouldn't do it. And then Clemson came around. And, you know, you had kind of this back and forth between Clemson and Alabama for a few years. And, you know, I'd say personally that they're both at the same plane. I don't think either one is above the other. They're at the same plane. And honestly, those national championship games between Bama and Clemson, except for that one where Trevor Lawrence just shredded Alabama's defense, they've been some of the best national title games that I've ever seen. Just with the amount of talent that's been going on, the back and forth nature of the game, it's been some of the best games I've seen. So I think it's personally a good thing. Coach Steve, what do you think? Bama Clemson every year, good thing or bad thing?
I missed all of that, guys that were listening. I had to walk away. So if you hear something repeated, I'm sorry. I heard him say, depending on what you want. I know personally people always talk how it's a bad thing because it's old. They want something new. They want something, you know, whatever. But that's a lot of people still tune in to watch Alabama versus Clemson. So I think 1 year off helps a little bit. Like, okay, we don't have to hear Alabama, Clemson. But I don't think it hurts college football because it's like you're up here. You got to find, you know, motivated for those other teams to beat them. And I don't think they're worried about fans and people not watching. Like, how many people tuned in to watch all these college football games we just had? I'm sure a lot of did because we need it right now. So I don't think they're too worried about that. People tune into that national championship game for whatever reason. To see Alabama lose, people will tune in to watch it. Now it might be Clemson. People might want to see them lose now because they're always there. So it's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. So it's kind of both. Me, I don't care. It's just beat them. If you don't want them there, some college team needs to beat them. And people think they pick them all the time on purpose, but it's like they're good. You have to pick them to get in besides this past year. So it's a good thing to motivate guys to get recruits and beat them. You just got to beat them.
I'm pretty sure that Dabo Sweeney mentioned it, that early on, like before Clemson was really good, right? They were good, but they weren't really good. I think he said mentally we made the switch from recruiting to beat the people in our conference. We made a switch to start recruiting to beat Alabama. And from then on, that's when they started to really hit their stride. So to me, if you want to compete with them, you have to mentally start competing with them way before we ever see them on the field. You can't just say, all right, we're going to recruit the same way we've always done, and hopefully we get there and hopefully we can beat them. No, you got to do what they do, understand what they're doing, and then execute. Have them as kind of that dragon that you want to slay, right? And so Clemson, I don't necessarily see people hating Clemson yet, because I think the whole Alabama dynasty was still on everybody's mind and people were still hating on Alabama. And so they're still happy that Clemson's around to beat them every once in a while. Eventually Clemson might be hated too. We'll see.
But I think I know as of recently people aren't the biggest fans of Dabo Sweeney, but since he runs the program a little differently than Nick Saban, I think he's more relatable. So I think a lot of people hate Nick Saban. I don't know why, but I think it's how he runs the things. He's tough, but the way Dabo does it, he's very energetic. He's very uplifting. You see Nick Saban yelling all the time. Who was offensive coordinator a couple years ago? He didn't run the ball, and Nick Saban threw a fit. They were up 30 points. He didn't run the ball or something, and he threw a fit. And
who was it?
He took over after Sarkisian and Kiffin left.
Yeah, and so I think that's why people sometimes think coaches leave, because he does that, but he's so into it all the time. Even if the third string's out there, he's got his headset on. He's like, we got a coach. He's in it all the time, and Nick Saban's very tough. I think Dabo is almost the opposite, but he's proven you can win his way, and Nick Saban proves he can win his way. So I think that's another thing that people look at.
All right. Last question. And Coach Steve, I'm going to give you first shot at it. How long can the Bama football dynasty last?
Today, I wanted to say as long as Nick Saban is there, as long as he's there, it's going to go. But one thing that does concern me, and we brought up a few times, is how often as of late he has to keep replacing his coaching staff. When Kirby Smart was there, he was there for a while. When Prue was there, he was there for a while. Those type of guys were there. Lane Kiffin was there for a while. His assistant coaches have been there now. As of the past few years, they're leaving to go get head jobs, coordinator jobs. He's been able to replace, but how long can he do that for? And you've seen Nick Saban change over time. He's not at what he was when he was at Michigan State and LSU in his early days at Alabama. He's, I don't want to say getting softer, but he's smiling more. It looks like he's doing this. So as long as he's there, I want to say it's going to go. But the only thing that's going to stop, I think, is can he keep replacing these coaches? Because you're only as good as your assistant coaches and how they recruit. And so it's there while he's there, if he can keep replacing the staff. If he can't, we're going to see them lose 2 games or 3 games, and they're going to play Michigan in some bowl game again, and they're not going to be in the playoff. I don't think he'll ever get fired, but you're going to start to see that 1 or 2 game loss if he can't continue to replace staff at this rate. And that's the only thing that concerns me about it.
Okay. Coach Bandstra?
Am I assuming that Dabo Sweeney is their next head coach or not? If I'm assuming that, then they're fine. If not, then when he retires, that's like any major program. Who does he get replaced by? I think as long as he's there, they're winning at least 10 football games every year. He hires too good. He has too many connections in our profession to not. I mean, him and Bill Belichick trade assistants all the time. I mean, what's his face? It's now the New York Giants. Started off with Nick Saban before he went to Belichick, and vice like they do that all the time. They trade who are good assistants, who are good people to hire. He does a very good job at it. Like he lost Scott Cochran this offseason. Scott Cochran is a fantastic strength coach. He replaced him probably with one of the best possible replacements, which was Indiana's strength staff. He hired their head strength guy and he brought like essentially the entire Indiana strength staff over. And they've been doing some fantastic stuff over there. So, like, he always will hire good people. Like I said earlier, I still think his biggest loss was Mario Cristobal. I stand by that statement. I mean, it's noticeable. I mean, the difference in offensive line play. I'm not knocking their O-line coach, but Mario Cristobal is, in my opinion, one of the top 3 O-line coaches in the country. So, I mean, it'll depend. And kind of Steve's point on the turnover, but I think as long as he's there – and he keeps hiring the way he does, they'll be fine. I think it's going to be a little bit harder now with Mike Leach, Lane Kiffin, Jimbo Fisher, all in the SEC. And who knows, Sam Pittman might surprise a lot of us at Arkansas. I mean, again, there's one of the other 3 to 5 offensive line coaches in the country now head coaching your conference. So we'll see. But my gut says till he retires. My gut also says Dabo Swinney's the next head football coach there. So I could be wrong. We will see.
It's probably another debate that we could have, whether or not Dabo would ever leave Clemson. At this point, I think that'd be kind of hard, even if it is Alabama.
It is hard not to go home. I don't care what anybody says, especially at a major program like that. It is hard not to go home. I've coached a alma mater. I know what that's like. I mean, it is hard not to go back home. It really is. I mean, you add that on top of nice facilities and a lot of money. I mean, in a large recruiting and staff budget. I mean, I'm not saying he'll leave. I mean, because he's at another elite program. But again, I go back to the old adage. It's hard not to go home.
All right. For me, again, I have to agree with you guys. As long as Coach Saban is there, I think they're going to be good. Whether or not they're national championship level every single year, we'll see. As long as their recruiting keeps hitting strides like they've done, they're probably going to be up there. This year, I think what LSU did last year, I think all LSU did last year was piss off Alabama by kicking them out of the playoffs. And they pissed off Clemson by beating them in the national title game. So, unfortunately for everyone who's playing those 2 teams, sorry, but I really don't see – personally, I don't see how anyone actually beats those 2 teams. I think they're going to come out pissed off. Maybe, like we said, middle of the season, they kind of trip up over someone they shouldn't. Maybe it's a Mississippi State. We'll see. Maybe Georgia actually has it. I don't know. They've got a lot of problems. This year, I'm pretty sure it's going to be Bama Clemson again in the national title. I'm not going to call it. I'm not going to put money on it. But I'm pretty certain, 50% shot, that's probably what's going to happen. I think they're both going to be in the playoff.
Can we talk about LSU next, too? Because I love me some Ed Orgeron.
Yeah, we'll talk LSU.
I love Coach O. Like, I can't understand him half the time, but it is fantastic.
I know.
You have to rewatch what he says 4 times just to understand it. It makes your day.
Hey, Coach The Rock. We got to talk about him.
Yeah, like the man is fantastic. I love him.
I swear that most of these episodes that we do, these program profiles, it's not necessarily the program in the school. We're literally just talking about the coach. So
like as coaches, like that's what we do. Like that's why I tell people all the time. Like they're like, who you wrote for? And Bennett tries to get on me about being Ohio State fans. Like at this point, I'll root for my alma mater, Ohio University, all day long. But outside that, I look at coaches more than anything. Who's doing stuff right? Who can I learn from? I mean, that's why I love watching Jim Grove and Bill Snyder forever, because they ran good programs. That's just how I look at it, and I'm assuming that's you guys to an extent. Like I know Coach Steve down there is a Mike Leach fanboy, so There ain't nothing wrong with that.
I'm pretty sure we're all Mike Leach fanboys at this moment. At least I am.
I'm like the only Nick Saban fan around here. Everybody hates me. I'm like, I liked him before he won.
I think I've gotten like I kind of mentioned at Coach Bandstra. Definitely, I would say 5 years ago, I was definitely hating Alabama. Like I was tired of Alabama. I was just like every other fan in the country. I was just rooting for every team they play, and I was doing the exact same thing with the Patriots. All right. But now that I've been in coaching for a while and I kind of understand the game, I understand the game a little bit better than I did before. I have nothing but respect for those programs and for those coaches and what they've been able to do.
And sorry not talking about Nick Saban because we can go back and talk about Alabama's sanctions they had. It was Alabama was bad, like not bad, but it was not good. And then Nick Saban shows up after all the mess and the fire. And his first year, they went 7-6, I think, with Nick Saban. So he got there. Then all of a sudden, he got a roll on. But we can talk about that. I mean, they had sanctions twice, right before he got there in the 90s and stuff. And then 2000s from boosters paying people and everything else. They had to go through some times.
He took over a dumpster fire and fixed it quickly. I mean, that's what people don't recognize. Now, I mean, they also gave him the resources to fix it quickly. Like, here's your budget. Here's your recruiting budget. Go. We're tired of losing. We want Bear Bryant back.
And that's kind of what Clemson did. They saw that and said, okay, Dabo, here you go. Like, if this is what it takes to win. I interviewed a coach that was on Last Chance U, actually, and I was talking about East Mississippi spent money to win, and that's what they were trying to get Independence to do. So if you're going to spend the money, Alabama, here you go. Look what happened. Clemson, here you go. I hope Illinois is listening for Lovie Smith. Like, hey, let's get this back. Let's get Mike Leach or something. Like, go spend the money.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see how Mike Leach does at Mississippi State. That's going to be interesting. I'm sure we'll talk Mississippi State here in a couple episodes too, because we're going through the SEC. It's going to be interesting because they've been for last decade now run dominant team. They've been spread, but they've been run dominant, especially quarterback run dominant.
When Dak was there, yeah, too, he was.
Well, not just him. It was him, and then I don't remember that there were two quarterbacks after him who were both running quarterbacks.
Wasn't one of them like Shatterfield or something like that?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think. It sounds familiar.
Scott Shatterfield. That's why I want to say the name was. I could be completely wrong, but that's what
I can't remember.
Oh God, no.
What about that Navy game the other night?
Oh my Lord, we definitely got that one wrong.
I was with you. I got that wrong too.
That was yeah. Let's just not talk about that and move on.
Yeah.
Part 2, Navy and BYU. We
have to, admit our mistakes there. I mean, now that he said, okay, I messed up. It was my fault. We weren't practicing hard enough. You can see that they've started going back to full pads practicing and full contact, and maybe they can turn it around. Maybe they can make a good season out of it.
The other one of the other Mississippi State quarterbacks was Nick Fitzgerald. He's in the NFL.
Fitzgerald, because they ran him all the time.
Yeah,
all the time. BYU, man, I was watching that game. Their offensive line is scary.
They all started last year, too. They're returning stars, every one of them. That was a bad tackling Navy team.
Mm-hmm.
I think a new quarterback, bad tackling. So, see, guys, I went against the spread, and look what happens.
Well, it's interesting. Look at how bad Navy looked. Obviously, it was against what seems to be a good BYU team. We'll see what happens in the next couple of weeks, because it's not this weekend, but I think next weekend, guess who BYU faces? They have to play Army. I think it's at Army, if I remember correctly. I'd have to look at the schedule. And yeah, Army played mid Tennessee, but I thought that game was going to be closer than it was. I thought Middle Tennessee was going to be at least decent, and Army hung 42 on them.
Yeah, I mean,
their defense looked darn good.
But I think we're seeing I don't think it's just a talent issue right now. It's how people have adapted to COVID. Like, and Ken talked about it. Like, he was overly cautious with COVID. He made a comment like, we were probably the cleanest team in the country. They didn't do a lot of contact, and it showed. And I think you're seeing that with some teams right now. There's some teams that opted to be a lot more conservative with how they approach their practices, and it may or may not have been a good thing depending on the team and how they did it. I mean, I'm not saying what they did was wrong, but I mean, who knows? BYU could just be really good. They've taken their lumps the past couple of years. You just got an experienced team now. But also like we've talked about, Army's, yes, they technically run the same offense, but it's a different type of. It's less simpler passing concepts, more belly, and larger linemen.
I'm going to look up the BYU football schedule real quick. We need to do a BYU episode. We might have to break the SEC up just to watch BYU stuff.
We're from Alabama to Navy to BYU.
It's where it should go. It's where it should go.
No, we got to go to Mississippi State next.
We got to talk about the Raging Cajun that is Ed Orgeron. Like,
yeah.
Oh, yes.
I don't even care if we talk LSU football. I'd like to just talk Ed Orgeron because that man is awesome.
Who got screwed out of that USC job?
Yes.
That could be.
I said that then. That's one that, like, the fact that it was about his accent or how he act, like, the man has been one of the best recruiters for over 20 years in college football. That's part of the reason why he was on Pete Carroll's staff. That's why he originally got hired at Mississippi State.
Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, yeah, that didn't necessarily work out, but he learned from that. He's a great D-line coach, and like, I mean, God, he is entertaining, and his players love him. Like, you want to talk about players that love their head coach and their position coach. D linemen especially love Coach O.
Man, I'm looking at this BYU schedule right now. Based on how they played Navy, their toughest opponent on the schedule might be Army.
Yeah, I'm looking at it too. Oh, no, actually, I will say this. That Troy game is going to be good.
Yeah, I haven't seen Troy yet. Have they played a game yet?
I don't know.
So.
But I've talked to a couple of their staff members. Like
10:15 p.m. Come on, guys. I'm sleeping.
Coach Napier, their head coach, is really good at what he does. Their offensive coordinator, Coach Sale, I've talked to before. He's fantastic. I mean,
maybe we should get those guys on the podcast.
And I'll say this, and they have a little extra motivation because Troy's O-line coach died a couple months ago, unfortunately and very tragically. But I like I said, don't sleep on that Troy game. But look at the rest of the schedule. Yeah, it's probably Army and Troy are probably their two toughest games left because, yeah.
They play Navy next, too.
Who does?
Does BYU play Navy or Army next?
Yeah, they have a bye week this week and then Army because their schedule is way different because they had to try to find games because they're independent. They only have 8 games on their schedule from what I saw.
And Texas State wide receivers can catch. Who are the wide receivers coaches needs a pay raise?
Yeah. I'll ask you this question, though, theoretically, and we can finish it later if you want. If they go 8-0 with that schedule, should they get in?
No.
Okay.
They're
8-0. They're 8-0.
We need a part 2. Stop recording. We'll get another one. We'll get a part 2.
This has turned into a BYU podcast.
Overtime.
No, but if they beat everybody by 55 points, they should at least be thought of. And it depends on what happens with the other teams. And I know for a fact, if they go 8-0, they beat the crap out of everybody. The people in the committee, they're going to say, but they only played 8 games. They didn't play a full schedule. You know, if they played like a SEC team and won, it might be a different talk. But
you're arguing for is the Hawaii consolation prize is what I'm hearing. Okay. I'm just asking a question here.
I mean, I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's the way it should be, because this is going to be a weird season, and BYU they're lucky to find 8 games. But unfortunately, I don't see a way that the committee is going to say, okay, you guys are deserving because they only play 8 games. I mean, if they could somehow find a couple other teams to pick up in the next month or two, I don't know who would do it. A couple FCS teams might do it. North Dakota State might do it.
Ohio State will play them.
Yeah, I mean, somebody. But I don't know. I would like to see, based on that one game, I would like to see BYU up against a quality opponent.
Can we get them to schedule Air Force too, so we just finish the trifecta? Please.
Other than the fact that Air Force is only playing 2 games this season.
That's what I'm saying. Why not add the third and just go? I mean, they're right by each other. I mean, it's not like it's far travel.
Yeah, that's
Roll Tide.
I think we're probably gonna have to go ahead and end this one before it becomes an Air Force podcast too.
I can get my Air Force shirt off if you want me to. I can go that far.
Well, maybe we'll do Air Force. Like we did Army and Navy, but we didn't do Air Force, so we're gonna have to do them too, even though they're not playing this season.
I'll wear my Notre Dame shirt next.
Notre Dame ACC. All right. This has been the Armchair Coaching Podcast with Coach Bandstra and Coach Steve tonight. Unfortunately, Coach Bennett was not able to make it in tonight. I'm sure we will give him some crap on Twitter for it. But other than that, this is Coach Sheffer signing out.